Welcome to my channel. My cousin Linda always said her house had a personality of its own. Not in a spooky, haunted way, but in a lived-in, slightly chaotic and ultima comfort manner. It was the kind of house where you could kick off your shoes sink into a plush armchair that had probably seen better days and just breath. And that's exactly what I needed. Dad 52 life had thrown me a few curveballs. A divorce that was more amicable than not, but still left a hollow aching. The kids being grown and Flown leaving the nest, unnervingly quiet. So when Linda invited me to stay for a weekend while she and her husband, Tom, went on a little anniversary getaway, I packed my overnight bag before she could finish the sentence. The house was nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street in a part of town that felt a world away from our own sterile suburban cul-de-sac. The air here was different, thicker with the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. Inside, the familiar happy clutter of Linda's life greeted me. Like an old friend, framed photos of her two boys from gap-toed grins to college graduations lined the hallway. Her youngest Leo was still in college, a fact that always made me a little envious. Oft life still buzzing around her, my own home felt like a museum of a life once alive. I spent the first evening in a state of blissful solitude. I explored Linda's garden, a riot of colorful flowers and overgrown herbs, and then settled on the porch, swaying with a glass of iced tea and a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and for the first time in a long time, a sense of peace settled over me. Linda had left me a lasagna in the fridge, and I ate it standing at the kitchen counter, feeling a strange sort of freedom in the simple act of no thoving to set a table for one ladder wrapped in a cozy Afghan on the sofa. I flipped through old photo albums, a nostalgic journey through our shared childhoods. The house was quiet, the only sounds, the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak off old floorboards. It was a comforting silence, not the empty one I was used to. Felt a pang of gratitude for Linda Forth's little haven she had offered me. Eventually made my way to the guest room, a cozy space at the back of the house overlooking the garden. The bed was adorned with a handmade quilt, and the scent of lavender hung in the air. It drifted off to sleep easier than I had months, lulled by the gentle chirping of crickets outside my window. It must have been well past midnight when I stirred from my sleep. It wasn't a loud noise, more of a subtle shift in the house's atmosphere, a soft thud from downstairs, followed by the faint click off a door. My first thought was of Linda and Tom. Perhaps they come back early. Button. I heard footsteps on the stairs, low and measured, not the hurried steps of someone returning home. A flicker of fewness went through me. I was alone in the house after all. I sat up in bed, my heart thumping a little faster. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, my ears straining in the darkness. Then the doorknob began to turn slowly, almost hesitantly. My mind dressed through a dozen frantic scenarios. Intruder, a neighbor in trouble. The door creaked open and a tall silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the dim hallway light. My breath hitched in my throat. He was tall, much taller than I remembered from the Christmas card photos. Lau, the soft glow from the hallway cast his face in shadows, but he could make out the familiar dark curly hair and the set of his jaw, so much like his father's. He hadn't seen me yet, his gaze directed towards the floor as if he was trying to be as quiet as possible. He took a hesitant step into the room, and I saw that he was carrying a duffel bag. It was then that I realized he must have come home from college for the weekend completely unaware that his parents' room was occupied. My initial fear gave way to a wave of something else, a mething I couldn't quite name. It was a strange mix of surprise and a sudden acute awareness of my own presence in this intimate family space. He finally looked up and his eyes met mine across dimly lit room. I saw the startled drogny in his gaze, followed by a flush of embarrassment that even the shadows couldn't hide. Aunt Sarah, who whispered, his voice a low, husky sound that was deeper than I expected. What are you doing here? I found my own voice a little shaky at first. Leo, you scared my half to death. I tried for a light-hearted tone, But my heart was still doing a little pitter-patorgans. My ribs, a slow smile spread across his face, a charming lopsided grin thought instantly reminded me of a muckhinger. Leo, the one who used to follow him around like a shadow during family gatherings. I'm so sorry. He say, taking a step back as if to give May space. I didn't know anyone was here, Momin. Dad didn't tell me they went on a little trip. Psst, I explained, pulling the quilt a little higher. I'm just house-a-tang for the weekend. He nodded, still standing. In the doorway, a picture of youthful energy, even in his stillness. He was wearing a simple t-shirt on jeans, and I was struck by how much he had grown up. The lanky teenager from Mimre's had been replaced by a young man with broad shoulders and a quiet confidence about him. Well, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. This is a little awkward. I couldn't help but law a genuine warm sound that broke tension in the room just a little. Hess shifted his weight, and the duffel bag he was holding thumped softly against theater frame. I was just going to crash Hereford the night I have an early class on Monday, and I didn't want to drive all the way back tomorrow. Course, I said quickly. This is your room, after all. I started tossing my legs out of bed. I can take the sofa. No, he protested, immediately stepping forward into the room. Don't be silly. I can take the sofa. I've slept on it 1,000,000 times. We stood there for a moment in a strange sort of standoff. In the middle of the night, the air was thick with an unspoken politeness, a shared understanding of the unexpectedness of the situation. But underneath it, I felt something else too. A connection, a flicker of something familiar yet new. It was in the way he looked at me, not just as his aunt, but as a person, a woman, and in that moment I saw a reflection of my own younger self in his eyes, a reminder of a time when life felt full of possibilities. Tell yo hot, I said, a sudden idea forming in my mind. The bed's big enough for two. As long as you don't snore. A surprised boy's grin lit up his face. Deal, but I can't make any promises. He dropped his duffel bag by the door and walked over to the other side of the bed. As he sat down, the mattress dipped, and I was suddenly very aware of his proximity, the SN of him, a clean masculine scent of soap and something uniquely his own, filled the small space between us. Is shifted, making room for him. My heart doing a little dance that had nothing to do with fear anymore. He was just a boy, it told myself, my cousin's son. But in the quiet intimacy of that moonlit room, I felt like so much more. He represented a life that was still unfolding, a story that was just beginning. And for a little while, I felt like I was a part of it. He settled into the bed beside me, the space between us, charged with a silent energy. Wasn't uncomfortable, but it was present. A tangible awareness of Anna Thurperson in a way I hadn't experienced in a very long time. For a few minutes we both lay there, staring up at the ceiling, only sound the gentle hum of the house, and our own soft breathing. So Hesed, his voice, a low murmur in the darkness. How have you been, Aunt Sarah? Really? The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. It wasn't the polite surface level. How are you? I was used to. There was a genuine curiosity in his tone, a depth that surprised me. I turned my head on the pillow to look at him in the faint light filtering through his window. I could see the earnest expression on his face. I've been okay. I admitted the word, feeling inadequate. Life's been a little quiet lately. He nodded, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Mom told me about the divorce. I'm sorry, it was for the best. I said, and to my surprise, the words felt true. We just grew apart, you know? I think so. He said, his gaze distant for a moment. I see it with my friend's parents. I saw it's like they're living in the same house, but in different worlds. His insightfulness caught me off guard. He was young, but he had an old soul. What talked for what felt like hours, our voices, soft whispers in the night. He told me about his classes, his passion for photography, and his dreams of traveling the world. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else, not even Linda. I told him about the emptiness of my house, the feeling of being untethered now that my role as a mother had shifted. He listened patiently, his presence a comforting gancher in the darkness. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that soothed a part of my soul. I didn't even know Wazakin has spoke of his own uncertainties. The pressure to have it all figured out, the fear of making the wrong choices. Kay and in thought shared vulnerability, a bond formed bet. Ween us, an invisible thread connecting to people at different roads of their lives at some point. This hand found mine in the space between us. It was a simple, innocent gesture, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through me. His fingers were long and cool, and they lest through mine with a natural ease. It wasn't a romantic touch, but it was deeply intimate, a silent acknowledgement of the connection we had forged in the quiet hours of the night. I realized, then thought. This unexpected encounter was more a thon, just an awkward surprise. It was adgift, a reminder that life could still hold surprises, that new connections called be formed in the most unlikely off places. It was a gentle nudge from the universe telling me that my story wasn't over, that there were still chapters left to be written, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Our conversation dwindled into a comfortable sense. He was still holding my hand, his thumb gently stroking the back of mine. I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment that had been missing from my life for so long, He said, his voice thick with sleep. "You're not just me, Aunt Sarah. You're a really cool person." A smile touched my lips. "You're in it. So bad yourself, Leo." He squeezed my hand gently before pulling away and turning onto his side, his back to me. I watched the gentle rise and fall of his shoulders as he drifted off to sleep. I stayed awake a little longer. The first rays of the morning sun casting a golden glow into the room, I felt a sense of renewal, a quiet joy that was both new and familiar. The night had started with an unexpected intrusion, a moment of fear and uncertainty, but it had blossomed into something beautiful, something new I would cherish for a long time. It was a reminder that even in the quiet corners of our lives, the most profound connections can be made, and that sometimes the most unexpected detours led us exactly where we need to be. I closed my eyes, a genuine smile on my face, and for the first time in a long while, I looked forward to the day ahead. I woke to the smell of coffee. Not fine scent, kind one made at home, but the rich aromatic scent of freshly ground beans. Other side of the bed was empty, the sheets cool to the touch. For a moment I wondered if I had dreamt the whole thing. Hushed conversation, the shared vulnerability, the gentle touch of his hand in mine. But then I saw his duffel bag still by the door and a small folded knot on the bedside table. I picked it up, me heart giving a little flutter. The handwriting was a youthful scroll, full of energy and character. Aunt Sarah Etred went for a run, coffee's on the pot, help yourself. It was really nice talking to you last night, Leo. A smile spread across my face. It was real, all of it. He got out of bed feeling lighter than I had in years. I slipped on my robe and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The house was filled with a warm morning light, and the aroma of coffee was even stronger. Here a pot was brewing on the counter, and a clean mug was sitting next to it just for me. I poured myself a cup and took a sip. The rich, dark liquid alchem jolt to my senses. I leaned against the counter, looking out the counter window into the vibrant green of Linda's garden. The world seemed a little brighter this morning, a little more full of promise. I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of footsteps. A moment later, Leo appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face flushed from his run, a light sheen of sweat on his brow. He was wearing shorts and a shirt, and he looked even more vibrant and alive in the daylight morning. Hess, his voice still a little breathless, he gave me that same lopsided grin that had charmed me the night before morning. Replied my voice warm, "Thanks for the coffee, it's delicious." "No problem," he said, grabbing a glass from the cupboard and filling it with water from the tap. He drank it down in one long gulp. His Adam's apple bobbing westhood in a comfortable silence for Amamont, the easy camaraderie of the previous night still lingering between us. It felt natural being here with Jim in the quiet morning kitchen. It felt like home, not the empty shell of a house I lived in, but a real home filled with life and warmth and the promise of a new day. So he said, leaning against the opposite counter, What are your plans for today? Don't let me get in your way. I didn't have any plans, I admitted. I was just going to read and relax. Sounds nice, said, but a little. Boring, don't you think? I raised an eyebrow, and what do you suggest, a wise one? He chuckled, Eric, full sound that filled the kitchen well. He said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. I was thinking of going for a drive. There's this little town up the coast about an hour from here. It's got a great little diner with the best milkshakes Saruv ever tasted. He paused, his gaze meeting mine. Want to come with me? The invitation hung in the air, a bright unexpected possibility in the middle of me quiet weekend apart. Of me, the sensible 5-2-year-old part wanted to seno. It was too impulsive to out after actor, but another part of me? A part that had been dormant for a long time, yarned. For an adventure, no matter how's mill, I don't know, I said, a little hesitant. Come. Ani coaxed, his voice a gentle, it'll be fun, we can talk more, I want to hear more of your stories. On just like that, I was sold. The thought of spending the day with him, of continuing our conversation, of simply being in his vibrant presence was too tempting. Tourist, okay, I said, a smile spreading across my face. You're on, but you're buying the milkshakes. Deal, he said, his grin widening. The day was everything I could have hoped for and more. We drove with windows down, the wind in our hair, singing along to the classic rock station on the radio. He was a good driver, confident and relaxed, and I felt completely at ease with him. We talked and laughed, the conversation flowing as easily as it had the night before. He told me more about his photography, his passion for capturing the beauty in the variety moments. I found myself telling him about my own forgotten dreams, the things I had set aside to raise a family and be a wife. The little town was as charming as he had described, with its quaint shops and friendly faces. We had lunch at the diner, and the milkshakes were indeed the best I had ever tasted. We walked along the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, the salty air invigorating. He took pictures of everything. The way the light hit the water, the patterns in the sand, thelator lines around my eyes, and in the way he looked at me through the lens of his camera, I saw myself in a new light, not as a middle-aged woman whose best years were behind her, but as a woman HOA still full of life, a woman with a story worth telling. As we drove back in late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the road, a comfortable sun settled between us. It was salons filled with a shared understanding. I felt a sense of gratitude so profound it almost brought tears to my eyes. This weekend, which had started as a simple escape from my quiet life, had turned into something so much more. It was a journey of self-discovery, a reminder of the joy and beauty that can be found in the most unexpected places, and it was all thanks to the boy sitting next to me. The boy with the old soul and the lopsided grin had come into my life so unexpectedly. When we got back to the house, the sun was setting, painting Vesky in fiery hues of orange and red. Wes stood on the porch for a moment, watching colors fade, neither of us wanting the day to end. Thank you, Leo, I said, me voice soft, for today, for everything. He turned to me, his expression serious. Thank you, and Sarah, he said, I really needed this. And in that moment I understood we had both been a little lost in our own ways, and in finding each other we had found a little piece of ourselves. The weekend was almost over, but I knew that the connection we had made would last a lifetime. It was a bond forged in the quiet intimacy of the night, a bond of mutual respect and a shared journey of personal discovery. And as I stood there watching the last of the sun's rays disappear below the horizon, I thought my own story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just